Dr. Jazz.
Man, I have to first
Dr.
tell you,
Jazz.
this is all your solos.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
It's it's like, all the old tunes like High Wire, Highway 1. I
Yeah,
don't know.
wow.
I
Okay.
transcribed, I think, through the years a
Oh
lot.
my goodness. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I had a phase of transcribing like 15 years
Yeah.
ago, and I really dug your playing. I mean, I still do, of course, and
Yeah.
so I want to go through some things you've done, and I mean, you've done a lot. So,
Mhm.
uh, yeah,
We'll see what I remember.
yeah. But I wanted to ask you about the new one. I mean, the last one, Got the
Mhm.
Keys to the Kingdom, and
Hmm.
uh, it's so soulful. I think that's the word I listened to today, and it's beautiful
Oh,
playing and the band. And uh, first, I wanted to ask you how, because there's no originals of yours. Like, how did you
mhm.
choose the repertoire for this one, and
Yeah, well,
why this repertoire?
I mean, that was sort of the idea, was like, I realized that, with all the albums I've made, mostly originals on all of them. I thought, maybe it's time to do something with a bunch of stuff that I didn't write. But to see if I could kind of, make it feel like it was still mine, but with other material. So I mean, there was a bigger book of material, of course. I wasn't really sure what I was going to put on the record. There's only a few tunes on the
Yeah,
record, but we were doing more than that. So a little bit of it was just kind of seeing which ones worked the best, you know, or which ones seemed to fit together to tell a story. I mean, some of it honestly also had to do with just the length of the tunes. I mean, when we're playing live, that wasn't the first thing we were thinking about. And I, realized when we got it home, I was like, oh my God, there's all these 20-minute tunes. But yeah, I mean, I think I ended up with a program of something that kind of feels coherent, even if there's not like a specific through theme. I mean, it does begin with the Mississippi Fred
yeah,
McDowell
yeah,
tune,
yeah.
which maybe has a little bit of similarity with the final tune, which is, Got the Keys to the Kingdom, which is a
Yeah.
spiritual. These are both kind of, African American, folk tunes, really. I mean, they're not they were never written down by the people that I heard performing them.
Yeah.
So that was but then there's a Charlie Parker tune, there's a Joe Beam tune, there's obviously some stuff that's kind of maybe more directly related to the jazz repertoire, that you normally do. It just kind of felt right, it just kind of felt like maybe these hang together. And yeah, so there's at least another album
Oh,
of other songs that we were doing, that maybe at some point I'll get around to releasing. But that's kind of, that's what often happens. There's only so much room,
yeah, sure.
and I tend to arrange a lot and write a lot, so so that I have definitely ended up with some stuff that I like. So I figured it's better to have too much than not enough.
Oh, sure. No, it's beautiful. It's why did you choose like this? Like you mentioned, You Gotta Move and The Keys to
Mhm.
the Kingdom. I mean, is this like also the music you listen to?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
there's, I think it's a big part of my. I mean, I don't exactly know what what basket I'd put it in or something like that. But I mean, this kind of the feeling of the blues that's in American music. I mean, I think that's something that goes way back to my, the first things that I responded to in music. I mean, I remember well before I was into jazz at all. I was just looking through my family's record collection, and one of the records that I really loved, I mean, when I was like 6, was there was an anthology of Chicago. What was it called? Chicago, the Blues Today. There was
Okay.
volume 1, volume 2. You know, the side that I really gravitated to, especially there was one side that featured a band with Junior Wells and Buddy Guy.
Oh man, yeah.
And for whatever reason, you know, this music really spoke to me as a kid. You know, you know, maybe some of it has to do also with the fact that I grew up in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know, there was just, I mean, I guess wherever you would grow up in the States, but it, you know, in a city or where there's a strong kind of African American influence,
Yeah.
this music was in the air, you know, and also I just remember like listening to the radio. You know, the radio would be on in the car, so you know, you would hear the music of the 70s. You know, you know, I was actually born in 71, so you know, so these Stevie Wonder records, and then also James Taylor, and then Earth, Wind and Fire, and all this stuff. This was all kind of on the radio, so is this kind of very specific era of American pop music
Mhm.
that that I still feel was extremely strong. You know, I think these are just early things that I heard that meant something to me.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's definitely when you start the album with the
Yeah, I started
solo
with kind of like
sax, you know, it's
this
like
phrase. Yeah, right.
yeah,
Solo phrase. Yeah.
I like that. That reflects what you were saying now. I mean, I love that. It's so beautiful. Um,
Thanks.
but I wanted to ask you. You mentioned you're arranging and composing. Like, you know, when I did all that work, like I
Yeah.
tried to write lead sheets. You know, like I don't know, wistful,
Hmm.
and I learned the melody. It's such a beautiful, really old tune. So like, you know, Viva Las Vilnius, the groove, and Shiva, and whatever. Uh, what's your process when you're composing? Obviously, you're always composing for the band, I think. But like,
Yeah.
what's your process usually? I mean, do you have like a sketchbook also, or?
Yeah. I mean, I often just kind of decide, okay, you know, I would like to write some tunes. I find that I often kind of write in batches, so that I'm working on more than one tune at a time. I don't know
Oh,
why exactly. I mean,
really?
sometimes it's because there's a project coming up and I want to, you know, have material. But I find that that's often, for whatever reason, that's how I end up working. And I'd say pretty often the basic idea for a composition comes very fast,
Mm,
you know, because I mean, you know, I mean the way that that we're so used to playing. I mean, as an improviser, like you know, that's the easy part, is to come up with some kind of theme, some sort of group of notes, you know,
sure.
or some idea. Um that's that seems to be always there if you want to grab it, you know. But it's taking that and working it into kind of a coherent form, you know, and something that that will be actually fun to play, and hopefully fun to play more than once, you
Hmm.
know. Something that's gonna give some direction, but not necessarily only have one path through
Yeah,
it, you know. That's the kind of things where I was looking for, I think. And that's one reason is that, you know, standards are still so you know, fertile
sure.
after all these years of so many musicians playing. And that's often, you know, still how I work out new ideas, is kind of is over these standards that I have known, you know, for many years now. I don't even know exactly why. There's just something about maybe um you know, there's some level of uh you know, specificity, but not too much, or
Yeah.
something like that. So um you know, there's a lot of factors that kind of end up going from when I kind of have an idea for, maybe, oh, this is maybe a good theme for a tune, and then getting to where it's done. I'd say that the editing of it and the working on it, the work, you know, and that's the majority of the time. The basic idea is usually just in the amount of time it thinks that, you know, that it might take up to, you know, to think of an idea.
Do you write down the ideas or like record them on your phone? Or
Yeah, yeah, I'll sometimes, I mean, you know, sometimes if I'm walking around, I'll just sing it into my phone and
okay,
record it. Hopefully I can figure out what I was singing, you know, what I meant. Um, you know, I do tend to work at things on the piano a lot.
okay,
Um, I use that a lot anyway. I think that's a big factor in how I approach music. Just that you know, um, I feel like it's extremely helpful to kind of see the architecture of the whole piece and to, you know, be able to hear what the melody sounds like against the bass line. And, you know,
yeah,
that's often how I'm kind of thinking about it, even when I'm just playing the saxophone.
yeah.
So that's it's a major way that I write, and also just a major way that I work on things to get my ideas, you know, from the realm of maybe some nice idea to like a fully baked thing, you know,
Yeah.
where I'm, you know, I see how all the parts are gonna fit.
Mm. How do you keep it fresh when you compose? I mean, because when I listen to your, you know, when I go through your records, and obviously you always, if the band changes and the personnel, it's a different vibe already,
Right.
but still,
Right.
like, you know, with the greats you've played, like with Dave Holland, it's the same. I think it's always you're going somewhere else. Like, do you have sometimes a feeling that, I mean, sometimes I write a tune in 7 and I'm like, shit, I think I've written that. Like,
Yeah, I think oh yeah.
I mean, do
Yeah,
you have
well,
these moments or
I
not?
definitely have noticed, and I mean, there are some things that I wrote, you know, maybe 25 years ago that I go, oh yeah, that actually sounds like something I might still write now. You know,
Okay.
there's definitely, but I mean, hopefully it's some kind of organic evolution. It doesn't feel like it's the, you know, like the specific musical choices that I'm going to make from one second to the other, or, you know, exactly how I'm going to approach a composition. Um, I'd say that it's not necessarily, you know, any kind of conscious growth process, but
Hmm.
it's just the experience. You know, that I might make some different decisions now than I would have made a few years ago. And
Yeah.
I think a huge thing that's important is that I'm listening to music, you know, and I'm trying to find things that I haven't heard before, um, that maybe will kind of deepen my understanding of things I've already been through, or maybe introduce some idea that I haven't heard. And, you know, at this point, I've listened to a lot of music, so
Sure.
that also is like, wow, I don't always know where to turn, but there's always something, even actually in like music that I know well. If I, you know, I can still, you know, something that really has a lot of depth to it, you know, Charlie Parker or Lester Young. I mean,
Sure.
I can still listen to it and go, oh yeah, wow, okay, I hadn't really thought of it from that angle yet. You know,
Hmm.
you just kind of naturally do it. But you know, from day to day, the actual work of you know, composing and practicing, and then when you go out and play, you know, you're you really don't want to be conscious about anything. You want to just react in that moment, you know. But there does seem to be a growth process that just happens if you keep at it, you know, if you keep
Yeah, yeah,
fresh, if you
yeah.
keep trying to be open to what's in the world, and you know, how it affects you, and how it might affect the art that you make, you know.
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
understand the process, honestly.
No, no, yeah. Did you ever talk about like with, I don't know, Paul Motian or Dave Holland about that, or these guys how they compose
um
or how they wrote a certain tune that you played, or
I don't recall ever really asking, although
okay,
it is kind of interesting. I mean, Motion, I remember going to his house, you know, and I mean, you know, it was especially like the way that he wrote. most often these out of time kind of
Yeah,
free
rubato kind of. Yeah,
tunes that had these just amazing melodies, just
yeah.
really great melodies, kind of that felt sort of inevitable, but also completely surprising. Um, he just had a gift for this, I think. But
Yeah.
you know, in like trying to figure out how to phrase it, I would because the way it was written was often a bit strange too. So I'd go, okay, well, how are you hearing this? And he'd sing it to me,
Mm.
or I remember him playing things on the piano, and he really didn't have chops. I mean, I think it was almost like
Yeah,
this. It was, but it had such a vibe, like, and it was okay. That's what he's going for. He was very specific in a certain way, you know. Um, yeah, but I never really asked him how
yeah,
how
yeah.
he came up with these things. I mean, Dave, I know, especially like with the quintet, and I mean even now, like with different rhythmic things, I think he's a he's much more methodical, I'd say.
Okay.
And like with the um like much of the odd time music, there would definitely be conversations on the bus about different ways of approaching this tune in 11 or something, like, oh, we can break it up like this, and if you superimpose the you know the the whatever, like the dotted quarter over it, and then
Yeah.
how it cycles around every two bars, we'd all sit around and someone would be kind of clapping the clave and one thing, and somebody would be clapping against it and trying to figure it out. That was a part of how we kind of worked
Oh,
through
beautiful. Yeah.
some of the rhythmic ideas in those compositions. Anyway, so I think that was often kind of how, sort of a starting point for some of his compositions anyway.
Yeah. I love the quintet. It's just like, there's a tune in 11, and it's like you're listening, and like the one doesn't enter for such a long time on the bass, and then it's like doom, but still,
Yeah,
and Billy is
yeah,
somewhere else, but I'm listening to you, and you're still like, okay, you're there.
yeah.
It's
Well,
amazing how you guys did.
it's very interesting about all that music that, like, the first few times you play it, you feel like, oh my God, this is really impossible. And you're trying to kind of paint inside the lines, and you mess up, but then sometimes you go, okay, I'm gonna just kind of hear it, and then you're wrong. It feels impossible, and then somehow, after thinking about it and digesting it and working on it, and just playing it 50
Yeah,
times,
yeah,
then all of a sudden you just kind of know it and you don't even think about it, to the extent where a lot of those tunes, like after a set, musician go, wow, so what time signature was that tune in? And I just don't remember. Like, if I'm not reading it anymore and stuff,
sure.
I really don't know it as the number. Maybe I know it as like a kind of a clave that, but I have to sit there and count it out myself, because you're not thinking of the number. You just kind of know it as that song.
The
And
groove of the
that's
tune.
that seems like the best way, to really internalize these kind of odd meter things. But it does mean that, it really helps to have a band that's working enough that you can just play the tune enough times to get there. And, hopefully you have enough things in your repertoire that you're comfortable with, and then you can throw in the tune that, nobody's comfortable with, and work it out, and then, and then go on to something that, maybe a little more, so you're not, leaving everyone with that taste.
Yeah, beautiful. But I just wanted to ask you about Paul. How did you meet Paul, actually? Motion. When was the first time you guys played together? I mean, what was the story there?
Wow. I It must have been like sometime around like 1993, I guess. I'm
Okay.
not I'm not exactly sure. Um, I think it was Bob Belden
Oh, okay.
who who was from South Carolina also. Um, although I didn't meet him until I moved to New York. I think maybe he mentioned to me to Bob. I don't exactly remember. I don't remember the trajectory exactly. I just remember, um like, the first time I went on the road with him, and maybe that was the first time I played with him. I don't know. Was
Oh,
must have been like 93 or 94, because I remember having to make a decision whether to keep playing with Steely Dan or to play with Paul Motian.
Oh wow, okay.
And I was very young. I was like 21, 22.
That's crazy.
And I kind of had this feeling that I was making a very bad career decision, but I really wanted to play these little venues around Europe with Paul in a smaller group rather than playing with Steely Dan, even though I enjoyed that music also very much. Just felt like that's what I should be doing. So I had to tell Steely Dan that I couldn't make their next tour, so that I went out with Paul. So it must have been around that time.
Mm.
Yeah.
This is the first time you went to Europe then with Paul, actually?
That's not the first time I went to Europe, but that's
okay.
Yeah, because I definitely toured Europe with Red Rodney.
Oh yeah, he went to Europe as well.
That was my first touring in Europe was with Red. That was the first band I really played with when I moved.
Yeah.
And I'd probably already been like the way that I ended up joining Steely Dan was from, I think Donald Fagen came down to hear me playing with the Mingus Big Band. So I think I toured Europe with the Mingus Band at some point before that too. I don't really remember.
Sure.
But this is all kind of early mid 90s.
Yeah. How was Paul like to you guys? I mean, as a band leader. Do you remember?
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, a very unique musician and unique person, kind of rough in a certain way. I think he liked to cultivate that in himself, He was I felt like a very important thing that I feel like I learned from him was he just trusted his aesthetic instincts to a huge degree, and it seemed like he had tried to like simplify everything to the point, like when you'd see him play, he kind of looked like maybe he'd never seen a set of drums.
Yeah.
He was just reacting. I think that's where he was trying to get to. Now it only really worked because he did have, he had listened to so much music, and he had, I mean, whenever he would talk about music and the drums, a lot of times, it was about Kenny Clarke and Bud Powell and these guys. Like he was still thinking about that, and he would say, even if it was like a free tune that was out of time, he'd say, okay, so we'll do the head, and then you play two choruses, and then you play two, it was pretty abstract what that meant, because choruses, I mean, it's free and out of time. There wasn't any chorus, but he was still kind of thinking from those terms. And I think that's a big thing that made it work, was he did have that, super grounding, as you can hear, like, when he was working with Bill Evans, I mean, and a certain control over the drums and finesse and everything. And I actually found he had a certain kind of chops that are different than what people usually talk about when they're talking about chops, especially on the drums. Like he wasn't the fastest. He wasn't going to play all this independent stuff with but his time was very, very strong. It was very steady. The tempo didn't move. And it seemed to me he had a way of, really varying the the intensity and the way he would hit the cymbal. And I mean, the drums in general, where he would get a lot of different sounds out of each component of the drums, depending on like where he hit it, how hard, what part of the stick, which is a certain kind of, different kind of a technique, but was very expressive, I think. And he kind of designed it himself according to what he was hearing, and again, like he kind of trusted that he would be able to whittle it down to this, very simplified thing in a way, but with a very somehow refined sense of aesthetics that made it work. Another thing, I mean, playing kind of out of time and maybe delicately some of the time, like, this is, I'm kind of trying to do like a Paul Motian thing,
Exactly.
something that I realized was that you have to be very, very strong and very confident to make that work. It can very easily be like, oh, I'm just kind of, I'm not committing to anything. I'm not like it wasn't like that at all. He was like, definitely doing whatever he was doing. And that's a big reason it worked, I think. It was just a full commitment to his sense of aesthetics.
Yeah. I love when you said that sometimes when we play, like, and someone asks you what vibe you want on that tune, and it's like, well, kind of this Paul Motian open.
Yeah.
It's like everyone then is like, oh, okay, sure, okay, that's
right.
That's where
and
we're going.
What that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Did Dave then hear you through Paul when you play with Paul? I mean, Dave Holland, or?
I first met Dave, as I recall. I was still playing with Red Rodney, actually.
Oh, wow, okay, so early.
And there was a week at the Blue Note. Strangely enough, it was the double bill. It was Red's quintet and Joe Henderson's band.
Oh, wow.
And this was shortly after that Miles record came out. So, with Schofield.
I love that record. So Near, So Far. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a nice record. Oh, that's such a nice
record. So instead of Schofield, I think that week, it was Mike Stern actually, but it was with Dave and Al Foster. So that's when I met Al Foster too, and I ended up working in his band and learning a lot from him as well. But that's when I first met Dave, and then I think I called him. I think the first time we played actually was on Unspoken, that record of mine.
Yeah.
I think
okay.
I had played maybe a record date or two with Schofield and Jack, but I hadn't actually played with Dave until that.
How was that like for you? I mean, you were like what, 24, and you had Dijonette, Schofield.
Yeah, no, it was kind of terrifying, I was very happy that they said yes and that the record company wanted to go ahead and do it and do kind of an all-star thing. It's like, well,
that's a great record.
Okay, well, that's these guys, and they all said yes. So, that was fantastic, and it was, it was very scary until I kind of got into the room and we just started working on the music, and then it was like, oh, okay, it's some musicians working on the music. Like, we're just trying to figure out how to make these tunes work and what's the best approach for it. And I mean, of course, I was much less experienced, and I'd heard a lot more of their playing than they had heard of mine, but it was a very gratifying experience. I mean, just like, oh, okay, yes, we're just kind of all on the same, we're all in the same boat here. This music isn't made yet, and we're trying to figure out how to make it, and it was extremely fun at the end of it, and I really learned a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then Dave called you after this, right? Or
it was after that. It might have been a couple of years. I forget.
Sure.
But we kind of stayed in touch. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
And now we've played so much.
Oh, yeah.
So much together in so many different situations. It's been a great long, musical and personal relationship.
Yeah. I saw you in Ljubljana, I think, with Zakir Hussain. Like, I don't know where he played, like 4-5 years. COVID was in between, so I kind of lost track of time. But like 5 years maybe.
That
was amazing.
Situation, like the two of them together too. And I mean, Zakir coming from this whole other music tradition, but also, very aware of the jazz aesthetic, and he's been living in the States most of his life, and he's had a chance to work with all these great musicians, but he's also just a total master of that traditional language. I mean, it's just it's a very special situation, and to have a chance to just play trio, you know, with him and Dave, and have all that space.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love that. Yeah.
you know, it's a really special challenge, but also just just an amazing feeling to make music with these guys.
Yeah. It's so fun to see you because all three of you are laughing the entire concert. I think it's just like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so beautiful. You know, sometimes in jazz, it's like everyone has this serious,
Right. Yeah.
and just the look of Dave for you is just like constantly like, okay, such a
Yeah.
nice
We're
spirit.
happy when we make it. When
Yeah.
we land on one together, like, yes, we made it.
But you mentioned Unspoken before. I wanted to ask you about you as a band leader. You know, when you started making those records in the early mid '90s, and obviously now you progressed and done so many records. But in the beginning, was it hard for you? I mean, like, what was your experience? You know, presenting the music to the players and connection with the crisscross. I mean, how did that one begin with Jared?
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to remember. I mean, it's, you know, as far as how I mean, I think I started recording for Concord after doing a recording with Marion McPartland. She called me to play on it, and I forget how I met the guys at Chris, you know, but I was kind of on the scene. I mean, I was again, I was playing with Red. I was playing with the Mingus Big Band. You know, I sort of never knew how to navigate the business aspect of it. That, you know, that wasn't really what I got into music
Sure.
for. I feel kind of you know, extremely fortunate that I arrived before, you know, social media and all this stuff, where pretty much every young musician is obliged to be their own publicist, you know. So I was just concentrating on music, you know, and seeing if I could find a way through. I mean, I was, you know, I felt like I was always writing music and I was always imagining what I might be able to do, but you know, having the experience of going into the studio and being able to record a set of music, I mean, I learn from that every time I do it, you know. And now I have, you know, usually, although not always, I mean, it really, really helps to be able to play the music with a band before going into the studio. You know, most of those first records I made, I just wrote a bunch of tunes and we had maybe a rehearsal or two, and then we went into the studio, you know, and that was it. You know, because I wasn't really touring as a leader, at all until, you know, around 2000 is when I really started. So, you know, it's yeah, it's just a lot, you know. You feel like the music has a chance to gel as a band if you can kind of go on the road and have a chance to play it. There's just no way around it. On the other hand, you know, I mean, Speak No Evil and Maiden Voyage and Real McCoy and all, you know, these were just recordings. I mean, these were all musicians who had obviously worked together, but it was that same kind of thing where I think they just had a rehearsal or two and made the music. So, you know, it can work, is what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah.
If you got the right guys in the right situation.
Yeah. What did change for you? I just wanted to ask you this, like, also for when you went to ECM, because ECM has such a different aesthetic, and your experience working with Manfred. I mean, how was that like for you?
Yeah, it was, you know, it's funny because like especially before the first record, The Sirens, I wrote all that music before I knew that Manfred would record it. And I think I'd even contacted the band, you know, and it was just, I mean, these are, you know, I called my friends that I wanted to play with. So I kind of felt like it was just what I would have recorded anyway. And then somehow, I mean, some of it is the sound of the records and this particular reverb even that's, you know, but I actually remember being kind of amazed, like when the record was done and I listened to it and I went, oh, this sounds like an ECM record.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how that happened because it was just, you know, I mean, besides the sonic thing of it, and also, you know, that's where I wanted to go musically anyway. There was a certain, I don't know how to describe it, but a certain spaciousness in the music that I wanted to try and find on that. That seemed to just kind of fit well. I don't really understand it. Like Manfred does have some, some kind of way of influencing the music in a certain way. I mean, a lot of what I remember him doing specifically on the small group records anyway were just, had to do with the sequencing.
Oh yeah.
And he had some interesting ideas. I went, yeah, that's actually not what I would have chosen, but that's really cool. I think he has a certain gift for that. And yeah, it's hard for me to say exactly what it is that, at the end of the day, I was surprised. I was like, oh, it sounds like an ECM record, but it wasn't any kind of conscious
decision
thing about me trying to adjust to that aesthetic, and I mean, that was sort of the real, like, there finally was kind of a time I wanted to record the circuits band, and I knew that just wouldn't be the right place
for it. Sure.
And we both agreed on that. And I mean, we've sort of have left it open that maybe at some point I'll do something else for ECM. It wasn't like shutting the door, but for that music, it just didn't make sense,
Makes sense. I just wanted to ask you two more things. Like, I think you're such a hardworking musician. When you compose so much, you lead many bands, and like when you toured with Pat Metheny, how was that like for you? I mean, when I look at his work ethic, he seems to be playing 400 days a year or something like that.
Yeah,
but,
I know, right?
How was it like for you? You probably talked about that a lot, but like, I'm a guitarist, so like playing with Pat and being a generation who listens to Pat, obviously, probably as well. Like, how was your experience with Pat?
Oh yeah, I mean, his, he has an extremely strong work ethic, and a very strongly focused idea of what he wants to do as a musician, and the way that he organizes the music and kind of, arranges a set, and the way he writes, like it's all very, very well constructed.
I got the feeling
to get that message across. Now, I mean, it wasn't maybe as collaborative in a certain way as as playing with Dave or playing with Motian, or it's like because his vision is so completely his. It's like, okay, all right, well, I see where this is going to fit. So I mean, it felt to me like we sort of found a rhythm of, okay, how this is going to work and how I'm going to approach this, and each tune kind of has its space, that it's works in a certain way, and it's I mean, there's a lot to learn from that, just like how how to kind of take things from the realm of, oh, I can imagine, maybe doing something like this, to like, he just really follows through on every single aspect of it. And it, it's sort of a different aesthetic of how I lead bands.
Yes.
I sort of enjoy the, having it unfocused in a certain way, but I mean, just I mean, it was an honor to get to a chance to kind of help
part of that,
to be a part of that, unbelievably well thought out, well expressed, musical vision.
Yeah, it's like I spoke once with Paul Vertigo, and he told me like it's like a machinery when they were touring in the 80s.
Yeah.
It's really like
Yeah. I mean, that also made it a little bit easier to to do that many dates.
Exactly.
If you're playing that, it's like it did kind of fall into a rhythm. It's like, okay, well, we can do this. We can keep on going. I think that's one way that it's that you can do
Makes
that.
it easy. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
do that many dates in a row.
Yeah. Otherwise, Chris, I wanted to ask you just your connection with Dave Binney. And you know, I've played with Dave, and I remember he gave me the album South, and this is one of my favorite records ever.
Yeah,
And
it's a nice record.
you two guys, I don't know, on that record and on many others have connected to each other so much. Like, how did you meet Dave? I mean, obviously he was still living in New York back then, but what's your story with David?
Yeah, it was kind of a, you know, it was sort of a friend group. I mean, they were all, I think I probably first really met him, like there were all these sessions over at Scott Colley's house. He had an apartment on 72nd Street, and Dave lived kind of across the street. And Adam Rogers was there a lot, and there was just a bunch, you know, it was a bunch of people, and we'd hang out a lot, and we'd play, like, you know, during the day we'd just have sessions, read through people's tunes, stuff like that. So that's kind of when I first met Dave, and that's also probably early mid 90s, I guess, when we first kind of met. And yeah, I mean, I think he has something very, very special in his the way he approaches music, you know, and his compositional approach. It's, you know, it's very, very highly developed, unique voice. And he's, you know, he's been a friend for a long time. So there was a yearly thing that we used to do at the 55.
No, I know, yeah. That band, man.
Which was, you know, usually was with Craig Taborn and Brian Blade and Scott Colley and Adam Rogers and Dave. And it was kind of amazing that, you know, maybe for 10 years in a row, pretty much everyone could make it on this particular, I think it was like the first weekend of September or something.
That's incredible, yeah.
Yeah, it's surprising that we were all in town. But you know, so that was sort of a home base for me musically also, you know, just these friends.
Yeah, that's so important.
You know, and so of course these musical ideas also rub off on me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that's what musicians do, right? Try and steal from everyone that we like.
No, but just you two, you know, the two horns, like, and both of your sounds, it's just like so beautiful to hear how you know, gel and go with each other, like, beautiful.
Yeah, he's a special guy.
Yeah, beautiful guy. But not to take more of your time, like, Chris, what's on the schedule for you, like, for the remainder of the year? I mean, are you coming to Europe? Do you have some new records being planned even?
I was just in Europe with the Circuits group. I just got on, you know, a few days ago with James Francies and Eric Harland, and we have another tour in November. There's a fair amount of work coming up in October. We're going to with the SF Jazz Collective.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Music that we're going to do, and we're going to Asia and to Australia.
What will you play? What kind of music?
Well, this is I think it's, I should really know this. I'm supposed to be the musical director of the thing. I think it's the 30th anniversary of SF Jazz as an organization.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the 20th anniversary of the existence of the collective, which is amazing. It's really a long time. So we're going to write a suite. That was the idea, is we're each going to write a movement of a suite that has something to do with the collective. Now, of course, it'll be pretty abstract because it's just instrumental music, but that's you know, and then probably some arrangements written by composers that have been honored in the past, but maybe tunes that haven't been done, or do them in any way. You know, we have about a month and a half before we're actually going to get together. So we'll have some time, you know, figure this out. There's a lot of what I'm working on now.
Yeah.
And then there's what's going on. I mean, there's a piece I wrote for like a chamber orchestra, and
wow, man, okay,
that I did at SF Jazz in April, and we have some gigs. I think just maybe 2 or 3 gigs at this point with a Belgian orchestra.
Really?
But I'm hoping to expand on that and be able to record that. You know, it's a full concerts length thing. And there's a recording that I made in December that'll come out in the spring. And hopefully, I don't know if everyone will be able to make it, but hopefully. There's a new record of all originals that I wrote with John Patitucci and Brian Blade and Brad Meldo.
Oh wow, man!
I'm
Okay.
excited, to have that. I think we might be on the road in the summer a little bit.
Oh man, that's a killing group.
So a lot of nice things on the horizon. Another tour planned with Zakir and Dave.
Wow,
so
beautiful, man.
I'm very fortunate. I get to do
man.
this.
Looking forward to all of this actually. So, Chris, thanks so much for sharing some of these thoughts, man. I'll leave you a nice what is today? Friday, so afternoon. And
all right, yep. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Before too long.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye. Ciao. Ciao.